Good morning, everybody. Welcome once again to Amplified Radio, www.amplifiedradio.net will have to be the site you're on. And for those streaming on our Periscope site, we say welcome to the program. Democracy Now! Starts now. Youth Day. The International Youth Day was just a few days ago. However, there are some key things not to have missed out on. It made a lot of difference if, at the point of celebration, youth integration into some of the things that would have made the difference in terms of democracy and political participation had advanced even a little bit more than where it found itself. However, this year's Youth Day, or International Youth Day, as recommended and been celebrated around the world, was especially in Nigeria. Well, this would have to follow much of the achievement, at least at the national level, of the Not Too Young to Run bill, which afforded young Nigerians the possible chance to participate in election in Nigeria, to vote and be voted for. But even at that, the moral question is, how will young people respond to the opportunity that's now been open to them? How do young people respond to lack of opportunities or inaction by government or non-government actors, even when the need arises? And well, today I'm being joined by Sentell, the country director for the International Republic Institute, alongside with Ibrahim, and Ibrahim as well from YIAGA, and we'll be having that meaningful discussion this morning along the lines of this. Sentell, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Yes, let's start off by talking about building democracies, encouraging democracies around the world. Your institute, your international institute, has been all about that, but I can only start to imagine with every country comes a different challenge. The challenge of how young people respond to democracy, which somehow plays out different every time with various elements. How has that been in Nigeria?
Well, I think I'm trying to think of a very good analogy to use to describe democracy. Maybe democracy is like a soup, you know? Some people it's bland, to others it's very spicy. So I think that's how we have been viewing democracy around the world, and even here in Nigeria. Each democracy has its own challenges, its own circumstances, its own kind of cultural dynamics. And so here in Nigeria, we've been working with political parties since 1998. We've been working to build their capacity to operate as political parties, to develop issue-based campaigns, and also the most important thing is to become inclusive, to ensure that women, youth, persons with disabilities are actively involved in the political process. Because you can't have a true democracy if you don't have the inclusion of all of the country's citizens. So we've been working to ensure that all Nigerians are actively involved in the process. And we've had some successes, we've had some challenges, but you keep doing the work to see how far you can move down the field.
So a republic, I mean, in terms of politics, people often talk about, oh, Nigeria is in the Fourth Republic at this time. Even the Fourth Republic, which pretty much runs from 1999 till now, had seen a lot of internal changes within it. And one would say, oh, this democracy playing out. But it looks like what we have, both for young people, for women, and for children, is a situation where constantly, with every new leadership, there's a new approach to how democracy unfolds in their custody. If we go through the line, the likes of former President Obasanjo had his own approach to democracy. Some say it was a little bit military-like and at the same time tough, but yet results were coming in. Some said, oh, former President Musa Yar'Adua, late now, was soft, was diplomatic in nature, and was of course seconded by Vice President at the time, Goodluck Jonathan, who did go on to lead. And his achievement looked like it was good for Nigerians, but for the institutions built around him, they did not exactly achieve what they had to do. Now that we have President Buhari, the story is a little bit different. Everybody is trying to understand within both his body language and who he belongs to or who he chooses to belong to. But do you think at this time, with so much going on within democracy in Nigeria, the present administration in Nigeria have responded to showcase that they possibly belong to young people in Nigeria?
Well, I think, I guess I'll start here and say democracy in Nigeria is unique, especially if you look across the continent. You would see maybe some similar challenges that Nigeria's democracy have, but you may see some similar successes, but you also see a lot of different things about Nigeria's democracy. I think one thing to look at is there's very much an elite culture here. So the politics is run kind of by an elite group of individuals. So it's very challenging for young people to get involved because you have to break through kind of that wall to kind of get to the other side. I think the other aspect to also view is that whether it's the current administration or previous administrations, they've all had challenges of inclusion. Now, some people would say that the previous administration kind of lived up to the affirmative action of women in the cabinet and so forth and so on, and that is true. But I think all sides have challenges because the process is not open. So when political parties hold party primaries, the process is not open. And so whether a 32-year-old gets in, that 32-year-old got in because of a connection to a godfather, or maybe this was someone's son, or so forth and so on. The process needs to be open. So whoever wants to contest for the governor of a state, for the president, for the federal House of Representatives, whoever wants to contest has the ability to step up and contest, and people vote for them. But right now the system is really geared against them. Even if you boil down to how the delegate system is set up, it's set up to favor whoever is pushing the people to be the delegates. So you can usually see 2-4 years out who the next candidate will be for whatever position based on who the delegates are. So the problem is that the process is still not functional at the bottom level. And so that's still a particular problem that we're trying to work to ensure that young people have those opportunities. And so, the present administration, the next administration, whoever administration, will ensure that the young people, women, persons with disability have the opportunity.
Now, let me come to Ibrahim Faruk of YIAGA. Well, success, congratulations, first of all, from the Not Young to Run bill, scaling at the national level.
Thank you.
It then goes forward to say that there are new advocacy strategies you probably need to adopt for the state level. But one major question that a lot of people have been trying to understand now is there's really no scientific evidence or some statistics or data anywhere that says young people in Nigeria would actually take up the mandate or the opportunity given to them. Now with the bill, which is elite in status, so some say it's even an opportunity for some classification of rich people's kids to possibly buy farms and run for office and continue the, forgive the language, chieftaincy title in some case of their fathers. And do you think there's any way for you to verify that young people within villages, within communities, within states will be interested in running now that an opening has been created along the lines or along the political doors for them to possibly take up a job with the government?
Thank you. I think I should just start by saying that since the bill passed, or I think even since the campaign began, we've seen a lot of enthusiasm by young people to actually participate more in this space as candidates in elections. And I've had the opportunity to speak with many young people across the country. I think even on social media, I've seen how a lot of young people have used the campaign slogan, "Not Too Young to Run," as their own personal campaign slogans as well. But if I'll take you back to 2015 as well, when we did a candidacy study to see the number of young people that tried to participate as candidates, we found out that we had over 40 young people that were not up to the age requirements at that time for contesting these elections, but they still threw their hats in the ring, so to speak, to contest for some of these positions. Unfortunately, none of them were able to win the elections for which they stood for, and these elections ranged from senatorial to House of Reps to House of Assembly, and the challenge, if they happened to win that election, was that the elections would have been challenged in court, and they would have lost the election because they were not qualified by age according to the current constitutional provisions. So I think the current campaign, the current Not Young to Run campaign, has just elevated the conversation around getting more young people involved in the political space, especially as candidates. We've seen a high level of involvement already. when it comes to either voting on election day or registering to vote,
Yes.
whether it comes to some kind of involvement in the political party, working, whether it is working on someone else's campaign, so to speak. However, that level of involvement as candidates in the election is still very poor. There are a lot of systemic barriers, including the constitution. But I think in the past few months, we've seen that the conversation has been elevated and more young people are interested in participating.
Then one would then wonder, this International Youth Day for this year, it's all about youth for peace to a large extent. But one of the attributes that have not cleverly been attributed to young people over time is that they're peaceful or they're peace-loving people to an extent. It's a myth, but somehow it's playing out to be true. Why I would say that is, for example, a lot of the moving around or social movements that is being documented, whether it's Biafra, whether it's Masab, just name it. Somehow, somewhere, young people are in there, well, to spend and expend their energy on keeping those movements go on against the position of the state. Why do you think youths gravitate towards not exactly peace-loving events in most situations?
Well, I think I'd like to disagree with you. I think young people are very peace-loving. And I'd just like to use the example again of the Naughty Young to Run campaign and the engagements that we've had in different states and the National Day of Action that we had on July 25th, and how it showed that young people are able to organize and mobilize and engage peacefully with an institution such as the National Assembly. But on the other hand, I think we should just make the point that young people are on both sides of the divide, either as victims, either as agents of building peace, either as perpetrators of some of the violence in many countries as well. However, I think the solution to this challenge lies within the challenge itself, and that is the young people. Young people possess the solutions that we have to some of these problems, and I think one of the underlying problems is exclusion. And so that brings us back to some of the issues that I know Sentell talked about inclusion in some of the processes and inclusion in peace building activities. Many times, even in post-conflict situations, young people are excluded from some of the peace building exercises. I think it was the Frederick Everett Sitfong that carried out a research after the 2011 violence, and said that one of the underlying issues why a lot of young people engage in post-election violence was because they were excluded from a lot of these processes. And their recommendation was to open up the space so there is more inclusion. Young people are able to channel some of their energies more productively and help to build peace, help to build a more sustainable societies as well.
Sentell, let me come to you, still on peace-loving event, or the lack of it in this case. Former President Olusegun Obasanjo was in the news just over the weekend, and he talked about the fact that if young people were to take up a place, they have to kick out the old guys. How do you do that in a democracy in the most peace-loving way?
Well, the usual way is through elections. But the problem with that, again, goes back to the fact that the primaries in political parties are skewed to particular individuals. And so here in Nigeria, most of the political parties operate under a kind of indirect primary system where you use delegates. And so what you have is, even in some states, you only have 3,000 people choosing a candidate that is pretty much sometimes anointed to be in that office. So you have a small amount of people who are choosing the leader of the particular state. And so another process that can open up the process, but it brings its own challenges and expense, is direct primaries. The problem there is political parties here don't really know who their members are. And I think membership kind of waves between elections depending on, what's brought to the table at that particular election. So the problem that young people will continue to face is just the challenge of the primary system to get into parties. Now, there is a discussion of independent candidates that has been wrapped up in the electoral and constitutional amendments that are moving around, which will potentially provide some opportunity for people who don't want to be associated with the political party or who have found, challenges within the party to kind of run for office. But I would say, number one, as it has been said, during this entire discussion of not too young to run, you don't want your constitution to hinder someone's access to serving in parties. But it's also important that even if you lower it, doesn't mean you're going to have now 18-year-olds or 21-year-olds or 25-year-olds elected to office. There's still a process that has to happen. And that's also a second phase that we try to work with young people is understand the political process, understand how it works, get involved, get to know, then, kind of take your step. But if you just show up as a 25-year-old and I'm running for this office, how many people would take you serious? And so those are also some points too.
So how would you react? Because the question I'm about to ask Sentell is also coming to you. How would you react to the concept of when they say too old to miss out on the experience he has to offer, too young to experiment with his inexperience in government position? If I were to interpret that down the line would mean, some of the old guys we have are so experienced that we can't waste their experience on just kicking them out of office. But the young people are too inexperienced for you to leave the whole country into their hands. How do you broker a deal on that?
It was funny when I was starting out on my own back in my early 20s, 21, and I would apply for jobs and people would say, you don't have enough experience. I used to always say, well, if you give me the job, then I'll have the experience. But right now you keep turning me away. Look, there is a middle ground between those people who have the experience and those people who want to come in. And I think realize is that those people who have tons of experience at one point in time didn't have the ton of experience. So what was the working ground? And I think it's important to have different views. It's important to have people who see things differently. Maybe I was elected to the House of Representatives in 1999. I've been serving there forever. Maybe I'm a good legislator. But maybe I am completely clueless on the changing world around technology, around security, around intellectual property. But then here's a young person who has been schooled in that, who understands that process, who brings something to the table. We all have something to offer. Whether I've served in the National Assembly for 18 years or whether I just got elected, we all have something to offer. So I think that excuse that people use is just an excuse to keep people out of the system.
So if I may throw in a cherry on the question for your end, it's still along the lines of experience and inexperience. For the young people inexperienced, now one factor that often plays out in politics, he just talked about intellectual property and all the new technology that's supposed to be your democratic weapon if you choose to make it so, for the young people to use. But what about education? Education and, in terms of formal education for among young people who possibly want to run. I mean, some of the best democracies have assemblies made up of lawyers, of doctors, of people who have a professional meaning to their life before getting involved. One cannot carefully say that of most Nigerian youth at this time, many are seeking out jobs to try out what they studied, and so exactly saying that the education it's an advantage may not exactly, it may be just preemptive, don't you think so?
I think I actually kind of agree with you that education is not
on the show this one.
Education is not a condition for great representation. I think the important thing is that you're able to adequately represent the constituency that has sent you to the center, in our case to the National Assembly, to represent their interests. And we have many different interests in our society. We are probably one of the most heterogeneous countries in the world. But the youth interest is largely excluded from that representation at many decision making spaces. But what we've been saying over and over again as the campaign, especially on the Not Too Young to Run campaign, is we're not saying let us kick anyone out. Or neither are we saying that it must be given to us, just participation must be given to us just because we are young. What the campaign has been anchored on a lot is about inclusion of different groups and different interests, and are one of those interests and one of those groups. And how do you get experience? And Sentell also mentioned it, and I was just smiling and nodding my head like, how do you get experience if you don't participate? So I was.
But that often means that you experiment with the person giving you the job.
Well, it might interest you to know that we currently have legislators in the House of Representatives that were first elected in 1992. And I spoke with a legislator who said straight out of his NYSC, he said he was still wearing his NYSC vest under his shirt, and he won an election into the House of Representatives in 1992. And so you asked the question that what experience did he come with? But at that time, our 1979 Constitution actually allowed anyone who was at least 21 years old to be able to run for office into the Federal House of Representatives. Can we say that between 1979 and 1999, when we had a new constitution, that all of a sudden there was a fundamental shift in the way young people think, and we just suddenly agreed that young people from 21 can no longer run for office, and you'd have to be at least 30? Well, and also there's a need for that intergenerational dialogue where we have different interests, and we have some young people come and they also learn from the experience of the older ones, and we have young people come in with their own energy and their own innovation and their own creativity, and I know we like to talk a lot about jollof rice in this country, and I like that analogy of it's kind of like a jollof with different ingredients, and that is what just makes it so wonderful.
So instead, I'll use jollof rice. The one thing I if I can interrupt for just a second, the one thing I would also say too is also providing opportunities for young people to be a part of the process. Like, I'm a product of internships. I got my first job because I had interned for the governor of the state I'm from in the U.S. And after I graduated from university, they hired me. Then when that job ran out because we lost, I got another internship with a member of the Federal House of Representatives, who then brought me on as a staffer. So for me, there were opportunities available for young people to become part of the process. And so an internship program is a really big deal in Congress that people apply for, and I mean it's very competitive, that people want to be a part because it leads into so many other opportunities. I have a good friend now who started the same way as an intern, got a job, worked his way up. Now he is 34 years old and just recently elected to the Ohio State House of Assembly, if you would call it that. So there are opportunities that kind of you prepare yourself, work your way up through the system.
You Barack Obama your way through.
Yes, exactly. But those opportunities, number one, because they don't exist really. I think some people struggle with the ideal of mentorship. They think if I come to you and ask you to kind of help me, you're asking for something, and really I'm just want to watch you and understand you. And I think the second part too is that you need money to live.
Very true.
And sadly, in this environment, that's a challenge for young people, because there's so many people graduating from university and so many people flooding into jobs that sadly in Nigeria, being elected to office is probably the most profitable one you can have, and everyone wants to be in that process. And so it's a very challenging system, but there's a lack of opportunities for young people to kind of get started and build a career into these things.
Yeah, but I think if I should just add, like where we have a few of these opportunities, we should also celebrate them. I know we've had our challenges with some youth organizations or youth institutions, but if you look at the Nigerian Youth Parliament, for instance, the speaker of the first session of the Nigerian Youth Parliament is currently the speaker of the Akwa Ibom State House of Assembly, and so there was just that learning curve where you participate as a youth parliamentarian, and I think he's about 37 years old and he's doing a great job. The second speaker of that was the second session, also eventually became the youth leader of the People's Democratic Party. So we can see how it's just a process where young people can learn the ropes and then you move up, and we're glad to see that there's some level of participation. I think we're probably keeping our eyes open to see what the current speaker of the youth parliament would go on to do, and we hope he just maintains that that legacy as well. So where we have those opportunities, let us celebrate them. Let us open up and create some more spaces. So the whole question of, oh, what experience do you have, and you can say, oh well, I was in the youth parliament, or I interned in the National Assembly or in the governor's offices.
Well, that often may work out. I'm a little bit concerned. Let's switch subjects a little bit into the international scene a little bit, and this would have to also bring you in strongly on. Kenya's elections were just recently concluded, and within hours of announcing those results, people were on the street in Nairobi, and at some point in time, they said a few hours, 24 people were dead, including a young girl who was 7-year-old, standing on the fourth floor, the balcony of the fourth floor of their apartment, that was hit by a stray bullet. Now, you hear these stories, and I'm guessing there'll be floods of these stories that would come up as things do go on. But early hours of today, the UN said they are calling for calm in Kenya elections, with the people agitating, with those saying the results are fraud and the likes of it. I'm a little bit concerned about the role of international observers or international organizations, especially when it comes to election results, and when they call for calm, it's often interpreted as saying, guys, just make do of the results the way you say it. What's your take on that?
Well, our organization does a lot of election observations. We did the one here in Nigeria in 2015, and we did a small one in Kenya. Just recently did one in Ghana too. I don't think I interpret it that way per se. I think when the international community speaks for calmness, it is using the institutions in place to work out the issues and not resorting to violence. You know, not calling your supporters to go out into the street to protest or to cause damage. And so I know people have had similar concerns that you have had on observations. But I think, you know, I think the view from the international community is, you know, the calm is, let's look at the institutions in place and let's see how we can work through those institutions, you know, and let's not resort to violence to bring about the political change that people want. And I think it's important too in elections, is that there's always a winner and a loser, you know, and I think if people feel that the system is fair and that the system is working, then people will accept the results. But when there's any, you know, hair of suspicion or any hair of impropriety that happens, then people will be upset and angry and resort to, you know, I don't want to say violence, but to protest.
Non-peaceful. What was the phrase I used? Non-peaceful.
Non-peaceful events. Well, we'll see. So I think that's the challenge that that a lot of these countries face, is there's still suspicion within the institutions on holding free, fair elections, and then people are confident with the results.
We held that political breath in 2015 elections, especially for the presidential one, where for about 3 days the glasses of people who needed to had the glasses brought in to read out the results were being brought in, and everybody was just, you know, at that fragile state, and young people especially felt even more tensed about it. And I can only imagine every time a young person hears something about calm down, just, you know, call for peace, just let's see how these results unfold. It is rare around this world, once the results are declared, to have some level of recline, to say, oh, the results are different. But what do you think goes through a young man's mind or a young woman's mind every time the results are declared, and possibly turns up different from the expected way that majorities or supposed majority may think it should be? What do you think runs through their mind, especially in Kenyan results? Right now, some of them are saying, no, this was not what we voted for. We're certain that we voted for the 50-something-year-old man, not the 70-something-year-old person. What do you think?
And I think you just kind of answered the question, is that there's a feeling that the process was not free and fair, or there was some kind of manipulation along the line. And so it's very easy for young people to be mobilized around those grievances when they feel like, after they've put in a lot of support and a lot of energy to work on this campaign, and there has been some sort of mismanagement of the process that has led to their candidate losing the election of sorts. But I think just to come back to the 2015 election that we had, and to commend young people that worked very hard for a violence-free election. I know like the Vote Not Fight campaign, which also said election no be war, was very instrumental in reaching out to young people and using celebrities and getting young people to make pledges to say that, look, we're not going to participate in any form of violence after the declaration of the elections. And there was also some sort of pressure, so to speak, from the international community. And
Pressure you use the word pressure.
well, in a good way, just to let them know that, hey, look, the world is watching. We have our eyes on you. We know that whatever happens in Nigeria kind of also affects the sub-region, and maybe by extension the rest of the continent. But the international community did not interfere, so to say, in the way that the elections were run, but just to let them know that there's some interest in ensuring that the process is free, it is fair, that at the end the votes truly count and is truly representative of what happened in the election. I know also in Kenya, some youth organizations also carried out, probably not so profound as what we had in Nigeria, but you know, there are some community meetings, some dialogues, a lot of talk about making sure they don't have a repeat of what happened in 2007 and the outbreak of violence that they had there as well. And I think so we should also commend them that they've been able to manage the fallout of the election pretty well so far. It's been great to see that young people are working to ensure that they follow the process, and the international community. I think we should not misinterpret the statement when they call for calm. I think if you read the statements that come out, some of the like post-election assessment statements, they also have recommendations for different groups, and say that, look, within the ambit of the law and all of the processes, such as using the courts or going to the tribunal to contest, yes, or mediation, those are some of the avenues that the different groups should use to make their grievances known.
All right. Well, next year we would see another International Youth Day possibly coming up, and this one possibly will fall on a Sunday. My calendar knowledge says right to fall on a Sunday. Between now and next year, what do you think Nigerian youth should set out to do?
Well, I think number one, there's already a movement where YIAGA and what Ibrahim is working on, and that's ensuring that the houses at the state assemblies also pass these constitution amendments. But I also think it's important that, you know, 2019 is around the corner, and the things that happen for 2019 elections are already in place. I think one of them, you know, kicked off on Saturday when the PDP held their non-elective convention. These are all political events that lead up to who the candidates are. And so what we've been impressed with is a lot of some youth that we've been working with who are already making steps within their party to contest for various things. I think it's important for you to realize that running for office doesn't happen every 4 years, but it takes 4 years to get to that process. And so, you know, it's now August of 2017. You know, a year from now, parties are going to be hosting their party primaries. You know, these things are already starting. Delegates will be decided in the next conventions within the party. PDP still has to have a convention in October. APC has to have a convention sometime, I believe, next year. Other parties will have these things. You need to be working the system and putting in the process. And I think it's very important. The one thing I'll just have to keep saying is you have to understand the process. You have to understand what happens behind the scenes. And I think that's just as important, you know, as ensuring that the barriers are moved. Once the barriers are moved out of place, it doesn't change the party. The party still has processes and those things. So it's important to start. So if I could talk to you who are interested in running for office and being active, like today's your day to be, you know, engaging with the party leaders, getting to understand how the party works, and really just building relationships. And we all know that Nigerian politics works a bit different than I'm kind of used to in the U.S. I've learned these things, but you know, this is your opportunity to start working toward those things at the same time.
So Ibrahim, are you running? Or
I'm going to keep running for not too young to run.
All right, well, we'll see how that really turns out. Thank you so much for joining in on Democracy Now. Our guest has been Sentell is the country director for the International Institute's ODA, and now this is rendering IRI.
Yes.
I'm just going to stay with that.
Yeah, it works.
Yes, it worked. Well, pretty much, let me correct myself now, International Republican Institute. And well, they are in Nigeria, as with many other countries, constantly looking for how to encourage democracy to have a solid place among people constantly. And of course, Faruk Ibrahim is here from YIAGA. He's one of the lead advocates for the Not Too Young to Run bill, and we'll see the success at the state level and possibly the campaign poster of how Ibrahim would look as well. Thanks for listening in on Democracy Now. Good morning to you. I'm Femi Live.